Welcome to A Wild New Work. This is a place where we listen to the land, to the ancestors, and to the wisdom that still resides within us so that we can bring an old and sturdy strength into the present moment. I'm Megan Leatherman, and I'm your host today. Hi, and welcome back. I'm so glad that you're here today. I hope this episode feels really supportive and enlivening to you. This is the last of 3 episodes about a series of land rituals that I have been doing at a very special place called Oak Island. And if you haven't already listened to episode 167 or 168, you might find it valuable to do that, but you don't have to. Today is kind of a standalone experience. It's been such a joy to do this series and so different than the last land listening series I did for the winter. And in today's episode, I want to share some of the most meaningful threads from the time I spent with the land on June 1st. And those threads are softness, the value of softness, being sensitive enough to see the weave that is tying all life together, what generosity actually is, and how we can mirror the land and receive more of it and also make more of it in the coming summer. And yeah, this ritual was just really, really sweet. And I'm excited to share some of that sweetness and learning with you today. At the end, I would like to tell you about 2 containers of learning that I'm offering for this summer. Both are starting on June 16th. The first is a private podcast series called Peasant Summer, and I'll say more about that at the end. And then my most popular class, Composting Capitalism, also opens June 16th in a new self-paced version, and I'll share a bit more about that at the end too. Before we start, I want to say thank you to the members of Eagle Creek, whose monthly membership and financial contributions are helping to sustain and sponsor this podcast, which is available to all. Thank you to everyone there, and thank you to each of you who has shared or supported this work in some way. With that, let's move into our opening invocation. So wherever you are, breathing would be good. A deep breath would probably help you, helps all of us. I encourage you to find comfort in your body or do something to help yourself feel more comfortable. And you can add your energy to these words or just listen. May each of us be blessed and emboldened to do the work we're meant to do on this planet. May our work honor our ancestors and their ancient gods, and may it be in harmony with all creatures that we share this earth with. I express gratitude for all of the technologies and gifts that have made this possible, and I'm grateful to the Multnomah, Cowlitz, Bands of Chinook, and Clackamas nations, among many others, who are the original stewards of the land that I'm on. May this episode be one small stitch in the great reweaving of right relationship that so many Indigenous teachers are calling us into. I want to start today by telling you about the ritual that I did, and I encourage you to take what's useful about this story and my learnings from it and leave anything that doesn't resonate with you and just see what stands out and what is sort of meant for you to receive today. So I went out later than I expected. I ended up needing to go on June 1st. And in the lead up to this day, I was feeling a lot of crunchiness. Life has been very full and busy. And like many of you, perhaps, it's easy for me to drop the practices and habits that are actually going to support me in that busyness. They get they get cut off so that I can attend to the busyness. And sometimes that's just necessary. And sometimes it's a bad habit or a rut that I get back in. So it had been a couple of weeks since I had had meaningful alone time with the land. And that time is such a lifeline for me. It's the source of my nourishment and energy. It's my primary source of vitality. And without it, I can get really dry and brittle and grumpy. And that's what I was sort of bringing into this ritual, just this like desperate need for alone, quiet time with the land. I also think it's meaningful that I had just finished an amazing book, a work of historical fiction called Hild, Hild, by Nicola Griffiths, about a real woman, Hild of Whitby, who lived in the 6th century in England. And there's not much known about her life, but Nicola Griffiths paints this absolutely incredible picture of life then and what her journey might have been like. And in the book, she serves as the king's seer. And there are themes in that book that have absolutely echoed in the ritual that I did on June 1st. And I'm going to bring that in a little bit later as well. So I came into the day desperately needing this time, feeling pretty under-resourced, but also just, really, really looking forward to this time. And it's really interesting how each of these rituals, this was the third of three, each one has become more and more simple. And this one was the most simple and easeful. In the very first ritual I did at Oak Island back in April, I had all of these plans about, recording the landscape for you and weaving that in and like really making every episode really increasing the production value of it, I suppose. And the land was absolutely not into that and, took my staff from me that day. And then in the second ritual, I came with even less gear, fewer plans, and just a lot more openness. And it was definitely a pared down version compared to the first. And then for this one, I hardly even walked. I went close to where my car was. I had hardly any gear, just my offerings and, water and the basics. And I spent less time than the last two rituals. It was very, very simple. It was like, here's what I can do. And the land was generous and willing to meet me more than halfway. So it was, yeah, simple. And I felt a lot of ease coming into the ritual and also like knew that there were these layers of crunchiness that needed to get tended to through this time. As I pulled into Oak Island, the first animal being I saw was a great blue heron flying from east to west overhead. And I took that as a good sign that stillness and contemplation and ease would be a part of this day. I came into the island and parked my car, and the hemlock that I mentioned in the previous episodes, the poison hemlock at Oak Island, is a significant feature of the island. They absolutely have a place in that landscape. They take up a lot of room, and the hemlock was in full flower, which is very, very poisonous, lethal to animals like humans. And it's just really interesting that there's this kind of juxtaposition between all of the beauty and softness and ease of this day, and also the fact that I was, spending my time literally just like a foot away from this thing that could kill me if I, partook of it. So that's really interesting, just that the poison can be there, but also be so beautiful, and that life and death are always happening right next to each other. So I got out of my car and got my stuff ready, and then I just knew that I needed to go check in with the old land spirit first. And this is an incredible oak tree that stands at an edge. They stand at the edge where the forest meets the meadow or the field, and there is a game trail right next to them. So it's a place, it's a crossroads. This old land spirit sits at the crossroads. And I went and said hello and sang my song for them and made my offerings, which again were more simple this time: fresh, wild spring water, oregano, and smoke, holy smoke. And I felt invited by them to spend the day lying down beneath their canopy. And so it felt really important to just rest and be held by the land that day. So I made myself a little bed in the tall grass beneath the oak canopy, right at the edge where the forest meets the field, right at that crossroads. And, I kind of did my thing where I will get grounded and kind of feel into the five elements of the landscape and the five elements of my body. And that's how I sort of sync up with the energy of the place and kind of open the channel, if you will. But every time I would try to engage in a dialogue with the old land spirit, with this incredible oak tree, it was kind of like this nice granny is busy, like she's weaving or she's processing wool or she's harvesting nuts, and she's just like in her work, and it's just not a good time to talk, and you don't want to be impolite, you're there like at her behest, or like she's gracious in just having you there, and you don't want to be a bother and constantly like, Granny, what is your wisdom? What do you have to tell me today? Every time I would sort of knock on her door, if you will, she would just be like, just look, just look. Like, here, there's the land, there's all the wisdom. We don't need to like talk about it. We just are going to be in presence together. And I invite you to lie down and be quiet and rest. Like, you need that. So I had to kind of just watch myself feel unsettled and bored, and it feels quite vulnerable to me to lie down and try to rest in a wilder place on the ground. There's bugs all around, there's birds flying overhead, there's animals around, there's could be people around. I have a friend, Heather Dorfman, who is in Portland and has amazing in-person and virtual offerings in forest therapy and grief care. And Heather loves to sleep on the earth and can actually just like go take a nap on the land. And I have never been able to feel, not never, but it's hard for me to get so settled that I could actually just fall asleep on the ground alone without a tent or anything like that. And so it's just funny kind of watching myself like feel unsettled in this very, very peaceful place where I was safe and I did really need to rest. And after lots of, fidgeting and feeling afraid and sitting up and then lying back down again, I was able to come into a place of relative stillness and feel how soft the ground was beneath me, really see the spider webs in the grass, see the orange ladybugs all around, the delicacy of the grass and the grass seeds at the top, really feel the soft breeze in the trees, listen to the softness of the leaves rustling, just feel how warm and welcoming and gentle this place was today, how gently it was receiving me. And then I heard someone in the brush, and of course my whole body like comes to alert. I heard what sounded like someone walking in the bush, not on the trail, but kind of in the brambles and the hemlock. And so I sat up and I am watching to where I hear the sound, just being really silent. And out walks a small doe. And I love deer. I'm sure you do too. And I find them to be edge walkers, that they are often at the edge of the forest and the meadow, but also spiritually, they feel like beings who help us walk that edge between this world and the other world. That's how they feel to me. And I made eye contact with this doe, and her ears are up and like alert, and her tail's kind of wagging. And she's maybe 15 feet from where I am, and we're just looking at each other. And I gently said hello, and you're so beautiful, and I'm so glad you're here. And she kept looking behind me. I don't know if she was looking for other humans or like who's around, or maybe she had kin around and she was looking for. I had the idea that maybe she's like seeing all of my ancestors behind me, which I really like that idea. But she kept kind of looking around and just checking me out. And I felt like I was kind of making her feel on alert. So I like very slowly just got down onto my belly on the ground again and was kind of hiding in the grass. And she watched me for a while longer, and then she just sort of started wandering away. And then she began to bound across this big field toward the lake. And it wasn't like running out of fear. It was truly just like joyful bounding. It looked so sweet and graceful and fun, and she just bounded all the way across until I lost her in the trees on the other side, and it was really, really sweet. So then I just laid down some more and kind of knocked at the old land spirit's door again, and she's like, "Child, just lay down." Just be quiet and rest and look, like the message is all around you. You don't need to inquire any further. Like, just be here. Be here. Come home. This is home. Lay down, rest. And so I did for a long time, and eventually it felt like maybe it was time to close. And I heard a raven flying again from east to west, from the lake to the forest. And they were just cawing incessantly as they flew across the field above me. And then there was another raven coming from west to east who was talking to them. They were like finding each other or something. And I looked above, and the raven coming from east to west met up with the other one. They found each other and they had like a whole little conversation. And then they turned together to fly from west to east back toward the lake again. And I don't know what meaning, there may not be any meaning in that, but it just felt really, really sweet. Just like friends finding each other. They had something to do together, and they found each other and they were on their way. So I just said some final prayers and prayers of gratitude. Thank you for having me today. This was so sweet and gentle and exactly what I had capacity for. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I lit some more smoke as a final offering, and I went to move my pack. And for some reason I had not seen before, my pack was sitting right on top of a feather, a big feather. It's brownish gray. I haven't been able to identify it. It could be a heron feather, which would be really magical since that's who I saw. It could also be a sandhill crane feather, or I don't think it's a goose feather, but I'm not really sure. I'll post a picture online. But it felt absolutely like a gift of the land and a kind of a physical representation of what I was invited into that day, which was this lightness, this levity and softness. And feathers are in the sort of five element system that I practice and study. Feathers are the mineral element. They're not growing. They're, yeah, not a growing substance or being. They're from an animal that was growing, that is nature, but the feather itself is this, it falls downward down into its mineral nature. And mineral is also the spinal bone that I found in the last ritual that I did. So now on my altar, I have a lingcod jaw from the Ocean series, the bones of a mouth. I have the bones of a cow, I think, a cow's spine from the last ritual at Oak Island. And now there's a feather. And it felt like the land was showing me another way to be, another way to exist in the world. I think the lingcod jaw is about like that practice in the winter of becoming sort of a mouth of the ocean and speaking with the ocean. I think the cow's spine from last time was really about that like strength of the oak tree, which we explored in the last episode, and kind of the trunk of the tree, the trunk of the animal and the spine, and kind of the strength of that, and what lives in our bones still, the ancestral memory of kinship. And now the feather is here to say that you can also fly. Truth can also come very, very lightly, very gracefully, softly, beautifully, that it doesn't always have to come so heavy and so epic. It can be this graceful. So, of course, I said thank you very, very much. I said goodbye to everyone, and I was walking out so much more slowly than I came in. I just felt really full and grateful for that restful time. And I come out to the trail to head back to my car, and I look overhead, and there's a bald eagle circling over my car. And the eagle has been my guide at each of these three rituals. They have shown up every time I have needed to like know where I was going. The first time they circled around my ritual spot. The second time they circled around the tree that I was meant to connect with. And now they were circling around my car as if to say, like, it's time to go home and that you can carry this home with you, that this is not leaving you, but that this is where you're meant to be now. And then on my drive out, there was a turkey vulture that like nearly came down to my windshield and was circling over my car as I was driving out, as if to kind of reiterate and reinforce the messages of that day. I think birds were a really important teacher, all of those birds, important teachers in this ritual, and just their experience of knowing how to, be effortful and fly and flap their wings, but how the wings themselves are so, so light, and how there are times when we're absolutely meant to simply ride the wind and let it be really easy. Let something else carry us in a way that's different than, water carrying us and going with the flow, and in a way that's different than the earth holding us, but the air, the mineral of the air kind of just carrying us and letting us float and be light. I think there's real medicine in that. So that was the ritual. It was not super long. It's not painful at all. It was absolutely enjoyable, and ritual can be that as well, and is often, I think, quite enjoyable and a good reminder that change and learning doesn't have to feel painful all the time or be arduous or take a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes it's that gentle. So I want to share just three or four major ideas or learnings that I think the land wanted to communicate with me and to you from that day. The first is just a very basic foundational reminder that the land is what helps us to come home again. When I go to the land, it's to come home to myself again, to come home to my earth self, my animal self, the me that is the most natural. And that is what the earth does. The ground welcomes us. The ground is always holding us. The earth is our first home. And that's where we can go to come home again, to feel ourselves truly as ourselves and connect with the energy of just being home and welcomed and in the place of our original belonging. And we come home again every time we transition between the seasons. So, again, in the five element system, every element has a season, and the season of spring is the nature element. So, it's when the nature element is most pronounced. And that's the energy that we're invited to work with. It's the upward movement of life that is growing, the fungi, the animals, the plants. It's understanding how nature grows. How do we go from a seed to a sapling to a tree? How do we go from a caterpillar to the cocoon to the butterfly? Nature teaches us those principles in the spring. But then between spring and summer, soon you will begin to feel that we've gone into some kind of different transitional time where we're not quite in the season of summer, which is the element of fire, the sort of outward movement of the heart's generosity and fruiting and the abundance of color and warmth and vibrancy that fire brings. What we're going to step into between spring and summer are what are called earth days, when the earth element is at the fore, when we come back down from nature, down into the ground again, and we orient to what is here now, what has grown already. Where am I in the transformational process? What has happened that is not actually going to keep growing, that didn't make it this year, and what has already bloomed or what is yet to come. It's a couple weeks of transition where we can assess where we are, what's happened, what needs to stay in this season, and what am I bringing with me into the next season. And connecting to the land inside of that transitional period can really, really help us to find home again and orient ourselves so that instead of moving through life like we're just on an assembly line, we are moving with the rhythms of it. We have done spring. I hope this spring you have tried something new, that I hope you feel like you have grown or blossomed or, unfurled out of your seed a little bit. And now with the summer, starting with the solstice on June 20th, we're going to shift into a different kind of energy. And the earth days and the earth itself, the land, is a place and a time in which you can come home again and rest and find the ground, find that stability, and move into the summer with a lot of intention and power and energy. So the land helps us to come home again, and the earth days do as well. The second primary thing that I think stands out from this time with the land is that softness is a viable way to live. Softness is an absolutely valuable way of being in the natural world. And I remember many years ago, I was pregnant with my son, and I went and I did a like 1 day tracking workshop. And the guide was a man who was, teaching us about tracking and just like chatting a lot, as we would walk. And he was telling us about this video that he had just watched of, I think it was a cougar attacking a bear's den and killing the bear cubs. And, I'm like super pregnant, not super pregnant, but like very visibly pregnant. I think everyone else in the workshop were women. And he's telling us this story about this gruesome encounter that he watched. And he's like, I mean, nature just doesn't give a fuck, like, nature doesn't give a fuck. The cougar's going to come and just kill those bear cubs. And like, kind of stating that like this is the way of things, that it's all blood and tooth and claw and death and survival of the fittest. And that is true. Sometimes that is what life looks like on the land. Death is absolutely part of this. Everyone has to eat. Everyone has to be resourced. Everyone dies eventually. And even if things end that way, along the way, and even in the death, softness is a very prevalent strategy and way of being on the land. Softness is a viable way to be in the world. The doe came that day, a small doe. She is soft. Her look was soft. The way she moved was soft. Her steps were soft. Even her bounding was soft. It looked like she was just floating through the air. The birds that flew were soft. Their feathers are soft. The feather I found on the ground was soft and light. The ground was soft beneath me, the grass swaying in the wind was soft, supple, bending. The breeze was gentle. And the land wanted to remind all of us, I think, that that is also a way to live. That is also a way to be. The Ocean series that was the precursor to this series, the series of episodes I did from the winter, that series felt so epic, like epic in my body, because the ocean is epic. Of course, the ocean is this incredible container, this primordial container of power, truly, the power of water. But much of nature, another element that is equally powerful and important, much of nature is soft. It's slow. The living beings here on Oak Island and in that ritual, like oak, deer, heron, they are soft. Many of them move slowly. They coast on the wind or they bound in the field. And there is wisdom in that. There is wisdom in all of it, all of these different ways of being in the land. And the land reminds us that those ways of being are open to you as well. You can absolutely be epic and stormy and crashing on the rocks. You can also be very, very soft and light. Capitalism and living inside of this culture has made us so used to living arduously and becoming accustomed to hardship and challenge and ferocity and sharpness and pain. And it's not just capitalism, but civilization too. When humans began practicing agriculture as the primary means of making food or accessing food, humans went from spending maybe 3 to 4 hours on food cultivation and preparation and processing to, the entire day of cultivating crops, harvesting them, planting, storing, processing. Agriculture is arduous. If it works, it's true, it can feed a larger population, but we all know that it's also a precarious system that is really, really hurting our earth right now. So here we are in this culture today that is so sharp, so severe. What people are being forced in and forced to choose between is really, really unnatural. And we're in this system where we think, oh, well, I mean, of course you have to work for money. Like, of course, you have to spend your precious life doing that. Of course, you can't take care of your dying loved one because you have to go to that job to earn money to pay someone to care for her. Or, of course, everyone has to scrape and worry in order to afford a safe, comfortable home. Nature doesn't give a fuck, right? That's just how it is. But that is not how we evolved. That's not how it has to be. That is not the only way. That is not the only successful strategy that we see on the land. Of course, in every life, there's hardship. There are always storms and death and grief, but there is also softness. The softness of spring, of new buds, of flowers blooming, the softness of a gentle breeze, of deer skin, the softness of the dawn. The spring has invited us into that softness. So, where could softness and flexibility and ease and lightness be the right way for you right now? Where could that be the right way for you to be in the world? Could you let things go right now? What could you put down as we shift into the earth days? What could become as light as a feather for you? Here, I'm giving it away. I'm giving it up to the land. I don't know how to make this happen. I don't know how to make this grow. Here, I'm surrendering it. It'll come with me into the summer or it won't. Could you coast on the wind for a while and stop flapping so hard? Could whatever you're creating or moving into or the way you're moving be gentle, supple? Could beauty be the priority? Could beauty be the guiding purpose of what you're doing right now? I think the land would celebrate that with you. The final thing that stands out from this ritual is the idea of seeing the weave that's there. When I was laying in the grass, just watching everything and watching the beauty there, I felt this familiar message, which I've heard many times before, which is this is real life. This is real life. This is life. It's not what's on my screen or what artificial intelligence is doing or what's happening in my human relationships. Life is all of that too, but it is also these invisible threads that are connecting us to the grass, the bugs, the trees, the deer, the water in the lakes. And when we're moving so fast and we're just in this arduous way of living that's sharp and vicious, we miss seeing the weave. We miss recognizing it, but we also miss getting to relax into it and just feeling ourselves as a part of that weaving. And so, in this book that I mentioned at the beginning called Hild by Nicola Griffiths, this character, this woman who actually lived, and the main character of the book, Hild, is a seer. She's thought to have the divine gift of sight. But actually, what's happening and what the author paints such a beautiful picture of is that Hild is just extremely sensitive and spends a lot of time studying the weave. She's out with the land for hours and hours on end, watching how things are growing, watching what the birds are doing, watching and watching and watching. And much of the book is also about how she watches the weaving happening between, the nobles and the king and others, who are working in the homes. And there's a lot of weaving that she's watching among the humans as well. But one of the things I loved about the book was that sensitivity to the weave is what gave Hild this gift of sight, of being able to say, it seemed like she was predicting the future, but really what she was doing was just speaking about the weave, the migration patterns of birds, what the crops were going to do. It wasn't necessarily that she was receiving like visions from a divine entity. She was just so embedded in the weave. And I aspire to, like, in my dreams, I would have time to spend with the weave like that and rest in those threads and watch them. And we don't live in 6th century England, and maybe you're glad you don't. And most of us don't have the time or luxury to watch the land as deeply as Hild did. But the land will remind us, even if we only have an hour to spend with them, the land easily reminds us about the weave and will show us what we're part of again. And that is a part of their generosity. And I want to talk about generosity because it's a theme that's going to come to the fore at this point in the seasonal cycle as we move from the nature element of spring into the fire element of summer. The fire element is related to our hearts. In our bodies, our hearts are where the fire element lives and burns and shines from. Fire is inherently generous. All of the elements can be. When you light a candle, fire is immediately giving off light and heat without you having to pay for it or ask or apply for it. And when we move into the season of fire, the plants, many of them will be making fruit and giving away their fruits very generously. The flowers are giving their pollen away generously to the bees. The bees are making honey for one another. All of this generosity and beauty is just going to continue to flow, hopefully. And I'm wondering if that generosity could be soft and natural for you too. But generosity gets tricky because many of us are trying to be generous from a place of being either burnt out or too hot and inflamed. And when we're coming into the season of fire, it's essential that it's balanced out by a lot of water so that we can burn bright and be generous and make fruit and give our veggies away and do all of the things that we want to when we're drawn outward by the sun, but not from a place of absolute dehydration. The land is generous not because it's dehydrated or desperate. The land is generous by simply being who they are. The oak tree feels generous to me because they have grown as an oak tree. I find their bark beautiful and a gift to look at and touch. The canopy they make by growing as themselves is a generous source of shade for me. Their branches are a generous home to the squirrels and birds. If I were a woodcutter, the wood of the oak could become an absolute gift, creating home or tools for me. So the oak is generous simply by being who they are. And that's true for every being on the land, you included. You becoming and growing into who you are, the most accurate, authentic, resourced version of yourself is whether you feel like you're giving anything away or not, you become a living source of generosity. The beings on the land are also not generous because they are under-resourced. They are generous because they are resourced. The oak trees are not martyrs. They are drinking in the water that they need, taking in the sunlight that they need, spreading out as much as they want to and can. And we get to benefit from all of that. They're going to make acorns later and feed the land, feed the beings of the land, not out of desperation, but because they have fed themselves first. And sometimes this isn't always true. Generosity can be from duress or death. Like if a flower goes to seed or a plant goes to seed too quickly, they are giving of themselves, but it's not out of kind of an ease and naturalness. It's out of desperation that they know that their resources are limited and they have to create something in order to kind of live into their purpose before they die. Sometimes we are blessed through death. You know, an animal has died and we get to benefit from their bones or skin or, receive something from them. But the generosity that we see in the summer among all the plants and animals, especially, is generosity that comes from authenticity, being resourced, and just living out their interconnection, living out the weave and web that they are a part of. So this summer, I hope you find yourself inside of an ecosystem, inside of a life where you can be your authentic self, whoever you are becoming or have been all along. And that by simply being that person, blessing the ecosystem and the community around you without having to do anything else, I hope you can be inside of an ecosystem where you are resourced, deeply hydrated and nourished, and where you can just live inside of an easeful interconnection where you feel yourself as part of this great weave. And you don't have to rush or push or fight for your place. You can just lay down and feel it and be held by it. That's available to us. And that's what so many of these nature beings and these rituals have been showing us. From the first episode that was really about how I was making this so much harder for myself than I needed to. And the second episode, which was really about oak reminding us of our kinship and our place in the weave. And now in this third one, just really feeling that. I wish I could paint a vivid picture for you or help you feel in your body just this absolute softness and welcoming and holding that I felt on the land that day, sitting next to that old granny, that old land spirit who was just tending to her land. And we don't need to like make a whole big story about it. It's just feel yourself as a part of it. Really, that was the message. I hope this has felt really nice and sweet for you today. This is the final episode in the spring season of the show. I'm going to be putting my energy in a slightly different direction for the summer season, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's been an absolute joy to move through this series with you. And if it resonated with you at all, or if you felt anything or have any reflections, I welcome your comments or emails or reaching out. It's been really so fun to do this in a different setting with you and learn from the oak trees, especially, and also all of the other incredible beings at Oak Island. Thank you again to Eagle Creek members who are supporting me and this show financially. I welcome your membership in Eagle Creek and also your shares, reviews, and sweet messages about the show. I'm very grateful to be in dialogue with you. I want to talk for a minute about Peasant Summer because that is a private podcast series that you might be interested in and where I'm going to be focusing for the first part of the summer. Peasant Summer is just a fun project that I want to do. It's absolutely related to the rest of the work that I do. And it's especially related to composting capitalism, which is back in a new way as well this summer. But Peasant Summer is going to be an 8-part private podcast series held in Eagle Creek. So you just become an Eagle Creek member and it will be there starting June 16th. And I want to explore what it might mean if we are peasants. Like, what if we are modern peasants? And what about the experience of the European peasantry in the Middle Ages before the emergence of capitalism? What about that experience could beautify or empower or enhance our own experience of the summer season now? There is a lot about the peasant lifestyle that has been misconstrued or maligned, and understandably, like there was a lot about the Middle Ages that I don't want to return to. And there's a lot about it that I think is really beautiful. And I just want to simmer in their life ways and perspectives. I want to explore what it was to work as a peasant and why many people today are actually working more than the peasantry did. I want to explore what it would have been like to have access to the commons and to forage, to swim and wash your clothes in wild waters. I want to explore the feast days of peasant summer. I just want to simmer in what it was like and see. I feel like there's something I'm exploring that I haven't quite landed on yet. There's something about that experience that wants to come forward into our lives today. So, we're going to talk about lots of different areas of peasant lifeways and history, and I think it's going to be really, really fun. You can learn more about it at awildnewwork.com/eagle-creek, and I'll put that link in the show notes. We start June 16th, and you can join anytime and leave Eagle Creek at any time. Again, it's $45 a month to become a member, and I welcome you into that container. Also, starting June 16th is the new self-paced version of Composting Capitalism, which is an 8-part look at the origins of capitalism. We cover a little bit about the Middle Ages, but then we move into the 1400s and beyond, and we move through a book called Caliban and the Witch by Silvia Federici, which is a look at different ways that capitalism was born and nurtured and its effects on the world. And I think you will be surprised to find how similar our experience today is to the experience of those who lived through the birth of capitalism in the 1500s to 1800s. And it's a really, really interesting class, I think. I hope people have gotten a lot out of it. And I think what it offers is a really clear understanding of capitalism so that you don't feel like you're just inside of this vague system that doesn't feel good, but you can't quite explain why. And we also cover 3 of the most powerful antidotes to capitalism, which are land connection, folk magic, and generous exchange. And the frame is really not about just resisting capitalism, but allowing the land and allowing our bodies to digest and compost capitalism so that we can actually get into like new fertile soil that will feed our world. So you can learn more about that at wildnewwork.com/composting-capitalism, and I'll put that link in the show notes as well. Okay, my friend, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful end to your spring season and beginning of your summer season. I'm going to see how Peasant Summer goes and where my energy is at in August when that concludes. And I may be back with you then. I may be back with you later in the summer and toward the autumn season, but I will be back for sure. I hope. So I'm wishing you well. Take such good care, and I'll see you on the other side.